how do we get our families to move in a unified effort to become what we can be?
So I think we have to start with acknowledging the reality of the family and what did happen to us through slavery, what has happened to us through mass incarceration, and living in this system where the laws and rules have criminalized our black men, and now to some degree criminalizing black women, where you literally have 1 in 9 children in schools that have a parent in jail. That's a real reality.
Get those stats again.
I think it's 1 in 9 black children in America have a parent in jail. Nobody talks about how around 2010, more women were arrested than white men. That's a key statistic. Most of the time, black men and white men are arrested at an alarming rate higher than women.
Right.
But around 2010, that trend changed. So when you continue to see the breakdown of the family structure, I believe, and this is just my own belief, that through the eras and the ways of slavery, that some still won't admit that it was wrong. If you live in Florida, people show up and say crazy stuff like we benefited from slavery.
Amen.
But it subconsciously, and I'm going back to my women's perspective, I believe that slavery subconsciously still shows up in the thinking of black women today, because through slavery, this whole notion of really not being able to trust the black man to protect us and think for us. The black man was put in a very vicarious position during slavery, where he was broken, he was emasculated. Yeah. Oftentimes he had to sit passively in order to save his own life while watching his wife, his daughter be raped and beat. And it came across to the wife and daughter that he wouldn't protect them or save them. They didn't understand, or we never talk about it from his perspective. We never talk about the black men that were actually raped and molested during slavery. So we to this point now where as black women, we raise our children in reverse order. What I mean by that, I have a daughter and 2 sons. My daughter will say she got a problem. I say, well, what's your solution? And she'll proceed to tell me. My sons will say they got the same problem. And I'll say, here is what you need to do. You get it? Yeah. So I had to train myself in reverse to allow my sons to think through situations. So if you get on the balcony again and you look at the bigger picture, the data says that a lot of our kids are coming from single homes that are led by females. Okay. Let's just say that's true. The results that we're getting is that they're being incarcerated. They're dropping out of school. We have to be real and do something about that. As a single mom, I can't teach my boys how to be a man. I can be a good single mom. I can work hard. I can put food on the table. That's why I need my church. That's why I need the Noops. I need the Omegas, the Lamplighters, the Kappa League, so I can take those boys where men can teach them how to be men. Now, I'm going to put food on the table. Right. And if they bow up at me, I'm going to show them that I'm mama, because I'm going to show enough drag them. I don't care how big they are. Yeah. But I need the help. So when we think about the family now, we need to meet families where they are, whether they're single parent homes, whether it's a mom and dad, or whether they're same-sex homes. It's the reality of the times we live in. Not saying we are endorsing anything, but because we care about children and the family structure. I love my church. My church was there for me through all of my ups and downs, through divorces, through addiction. It was the deacons, the deaconesses, the people in the church that loved me and my kids, brought food when I battled with cancer. We had a unit of community. We need to go back to the time, simply put, Bishop, where I remember I was raised by grandparents. So Miss Walters was on one side, her and her family, and the Rolls, who were Bahamian, were on the other side. So I didn't realize how ingenious they were. Miss Walters was the only one that was educated. She was a proud Zeta. My grandmother had like a 7th grade education, my granddaddy a 3rd grade. And I don't know what was the education level of the Roses, but they were Bahamian, so they had the good Bahamian food a lot. But there were times when I would have to go on one side to get some bread. We might have had the sardines and go on the other side and get this. But by the time we was finished and grandma made it, I was taking some food back to Miss Walters and Mr. Rose. We all ate. We might have had the peanut butter. Yeah. Somebody else had the jelly. Somebody else had the bread. But at the end of the day, all 3 of the houses was taken care of because we lived in true community. You and your family could be having a fish fry on the end of the corner. Right. I might not have fish. I show up with a loaf of bread. The other people down the street bring the mustard. Somebody bring the hot sauce. Now we all having a fish fry. We've moved away from community and become so isolated in our own little worlds and our own little boxes. And we're suffering because of it.
And what did he tell us? He said, I will say to those on the right, I was hungry. You fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison. You came. I was sick, you visited me. When did we see you, Lord? When you have done it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. Take a moment. How did your faith get you to where you are now? Then we're going to switch to politics. How did your faith get you? Let someone here, because that's how we talk about how we got here. How did your faith bring you here? That's good.
So my faith was built on a grandmother who rooted in me early about Jesus. Took me to church a lot, but Jesus was a mystery to me. I didn't understand this God that was going to get me for every wrong thing I did, but that loved me so much. So as I start living life and making decisions and drinking and doing, those things that the church people say you shouldn't do, but most of them was doing it and you know it. They just went to church and said something different. This whole thing with God became a real quandary to me. And it was December 2nd, 1989. I was in the old Volusia County jail that they've pushed down now in a pair of orange khakis with no accessories. After living on the streets homeless, after going to college and dropping out, living on the streets homeless, not seeing my kids in 6 months, I was in this very, very dark place. And I remember my grandmother would say like the strangest things, Bishop, like, you can always talk to the Lord. He's a bridge over troubled water. And I'm saying, but if the water troubled, I'm not getting on the bridge. He's bread in a starving land. If the land is starving, there can't be any bread there. Me and my smart, college educated self, I would rationalize it and say, well, I don't know if this God is real. I just know that I can't continue to live the way that I'm living. And I said, well, God, I don't know if you there or not. I need help. I can't stop using these drugs. I haven't seen my kids in 6 months. I just don't know what to do. But I know I can't be in jail and have my kids come into jail to see me. But I don't know. And I went to sleep. And normally when you've been on a 21-day drug binge and you go to sleep, you sleep for 3 days. So I woke up and this lady who was sharing this cell, Volusia County had bougie cells because they would put 2 of you in there and lock the door. In Broward County, they have like 6 people and you weren't there. There was no door and you just stay up because you don't know what's going to happen. Or when the drugs start catching up with you, just knock you out for 3 or 4 days. So this lady had asked to be removed from the cell with me because, I was deployable and I started a big argument with her and probably hadn't combed my hair in about 7 months. So I wasn't, my cutest self at the time. But she left her Bible. And I remember this day, after I kind of said this little prayer, I picked it up and I knew the model prayer from memory in Matthew. Yeah. And I tried to find it and I couldn't read it. And I realized that I was in serious, serious trouble. I said, okay, God, I done tapped out. I'm just a mess. I don't know my novels of sin, because I'm going back to this punishing God that I grew up with. My novels of sin are many. I don't know if you real or you out there, but I need some help. And I went to sleep again, but I woke up. The next day that I woke up, they told me that they were releasing me from Volusia County to go to Broward County, 200 miles away, to the rehab again. So I said, okay, there got to be a God. This don't happen. The laws don't work like this. They don't release you from one county to the other. And by the way, I was on probation. Wow. So the violation of probation should have given me 21 days automatically before I ever got anything heard from a judge. So I said, okay, this God must have heard me in my prayer. Wasn't a prayer of scriptures, wasn't some long oration of prayers. It was just a cry for help. I went back to that rehab, and this time I listened. This time I went to those meetings in the 12-step program. This time I did what they told me to do, because the thought of my children coming to jail to see me, I owed them more than that. Children are a blessing from God. I believe God gave me mine to literally save my life. And I just went from there. And then I, reconnected with the church, because I needed more than the 12-step programs. I could argue and intellectualize with those people, but I needed that book. And I started going back to Mount Olive, and Dr. Matt King Carter was there, and sometimes he would be preaching stuff, and I would say, this guy's spying on me, something's crazy, because it would be just what I needed to hear. But I kept going because it helped me. And then they had programs for the kids, so I could take my kids to youth ministry, and we could get free food. The church was open like 7 days a week. It was tremendous for our budget. And it was a safe place. And it was a place that I didn't have to worry about using drugs. Now, some of the people wasn't that nice. They would be talking about the girl with the jeans and the babies and all kind of crazy stuff. And Bishop, I would be waiting for them to say something. But I was going to cuss them out. They would have been at the altar for the next 6 months. But God just fixed it where they left me alone. And the Holy Spirit continued to work on me. Then, I started going to Bible study. And then they, got me involved with the missions. Sister Carter, Dr. Carter's wife, got me involved with the missions. They would bring me little clothes for my kids because we didn't have anything. We were struggling. I just had my jeans and my t-shirt. Whatever I made, I was going to dress my babies. And the church just really, really embraced me and my language and, my non-Baptist dressing. I still don't have the Baptist dressing down to these days. I just can't get with the shiny church clothes. But, some things the Lord will work out in the by and by. And it is through those kind of experiences that has caused me to have a personal, intimate relationship with Christ. And as a woman, I realized at some point, God wasn't interested in one night stands or being a sugar daddy. God wants intimacy. And when I work on my intimate relationship with him, what he does is he shows me a lot of things that I was dependent on myself and other people for. He'll just add them to my life. And I think when we talk about this climate we're in, we become too dependent on the government. As I could just go on and on. 2005 to 2007, I had a battle with cancer in my throat. My husband at that time divorces me. I'm serving God. I'm doing all the right things. Why my whole world turns up. So it's like God put me on blast, because not only is he divorcing me, this chick that's a lot brighter skinned than me with her Daisy Dukes, y'all church people didn't tell me that when I got saved, I had to stop wearing my Daisy Dukes and my halter tops. I was showing up for, 24, 36, 20, I had it going on. But when I started getting saved, something happened. I had to change the way I was showing up, for my daughter. And he was bringing this woman to church while I'm sitting in the pulpit battling with cancer. So all of my looks gone, my hair gone, and I'm a felon. So I can't cut nobody or curse nobody. All of my private shame has become public. And it's like God put my faith on blast. What are you going to do? I don't know, God, but I'm just going to serve you for the day. I'm just going to try to represent you well today. And I can remember being so discombobulated through that time with the emotional trauma that I was experiencing, with the chemo physically that I was going. I remember this one Sunday, Dr. Carter, God bless his soul, Dr. Carter hung in there with me. That man, God divinely connected me. I was preaching this day, and Bishop, I was so distraught, I could not get David out of the lion's den. I had to stop in the middle of the sermon and say, now y'all know I'm on chemo. I need a little grace right here. I got to just pause so I can get Daniel in this lion's den. But being transparent with my church community and just being honest allowed me to experience the love and allowed me to share openly. And at the end of that service, a young 25-year-old guy came up to me and told me that he had just got diagnosed with prostate cancer that he was planning to handle on his own without his parents. And by me sharing and him connecting with me, I was able to get on the phone with him and his mom and have his family help. So I've learned through these experiences with God that the consequences of my decisions, even when I mess up, God can turn them for his good. And God has shown up in my life in so many ways that I'm convinced that he is who he says he is in the word. I'm also convinced that he loves me authentically and
unconditionally.
And unconditionally. And his love is more superior than other people that don't like me, don't think I fit in or belong. If God loves me, you think I'm concerned about you? You don't have a heaven or hell to put me in.
Your testimony is such a, and I want those who are watching today, I don't care what you've been going through. I don't care what you have been faced with. See, your condition, your situation, nor your circumstance changes who you are in Christ. It can't change. You heard Dr. Osgood talk about her plight and what she went through, but look at her now. It's not how you begin that matters. It's how you end. Nobody gets a crown for starting. The crown is for finishing. You are not finished yet. I don't know what you've been going through. No matter how you got to where you are today, remember, God has no respect to persons. And where you are, that prodigal son that left home with what he thought he was entitled to, when he lost all of it, when he didn't have anybody else to sow into his life, went and joined himself, as you know, the word of God to someone else. And the job he had was to feeding pigs. He was so hungry. He contemplated eating slop. And any one of you know, if you've ever been around a pig, they'll eat anything. Then he came to himself. He said, wait a minute. My daddy got people working for him living better than me. And even though he was about to eat slop, he was still a king's kid. Just in a bad place. You cannot change what God think about you because of your situation and circumstance. He's the same God. He's the same God. And that's for you as well. Now, let me pivot to before we get you out of here, our political landscape for 2024. Project 2025. I've didn't read the whole title from the whole reading, but I read the summary of it from several different sources in what's in there. It is enough to make everyone sit up and take notice as to what is planned. And you can't convince me that one of the candidates running was not made aware of what's in it. You won't convince me of that. But tell us, in your opinion, I think you've read it. Give us a summary of how alarmed we should be.
Yes, so I have read all the pages of it. When I started hearing about it, I serve a very diverse district, and I wasn't campaigning on the ballot this year, so I said somebody has to read while others campaign, so it might as well be me. And I can be a bit petty too, Bishop. So I did count that it mentions Donald Trump's name personally in the the master plan about 317 times. It is a document written by the Heritage Foundation. The first rendition was given to Reagan in 1980. It says that right in the preface of the document. It's all right there. It's amazing. I think they only released it because they thought for sure that Donald Trump was going to beat Joe Biden. So they had already put this plan, how they were going to get rid of certain people. They started interviewing for these political appointees for these jobs and so on. But as you go through this 900 page document and all these different departments, the way that they got it broken out, you find very alarming things like kids who attend public school. And when I say public school, I mean traditional public school or public charter school. High schools will have to take the military entrance exam. So you ask yourself in a critique, why would they need to take the military entrance exam? I don't know, just maybe we're going to go back to a time in this administration where we start the draft. You see that it sets the president up to use executive orders to implement Schedule F to get rid of 9,000 civil service employees, to rearrange the Department of Justice because they have been actively involved in investigations. That's kind of their role when these things come up. That department investigates in a very nonpartisan way. So they want to get rid of them. The Department of Education want to get rid of that department. The Environmental Protection Association want to take that and get rid of it by putting it up under other departments, and then hiring people with patriotic values. Like, what does that mean? Means people that agree with the president's ideology, which is misrepresentation and actually disrespectful to all of the rest of us. When you have a nation like America, you need representation of all of us, not just one dialect. So you see extreme stuff like under the Department of Agriculture, you would get rid of the USDA, which regulates our food and medicine. So now farmers could use fertilizer, pesticides, or anything to grow food and not tell you what they're doing to make the food quicker and cheaper and feed it to you. You could have medications that you don't know that it have biochemicals in it to help you feel better because the whole regulation department is gone. To take away the money from the EPA, where we work so hard to move closer toward cleaner air and cleaner water, you would just go back to emissions. And we know many of us have been sick from environmental issues of dumps and waste put in our community. It is the most egregious plan from a humanity perspective that it clearly disenfranchises all of us that don't make over $400,000 a year, whether we're black, white, Hispanic, Latino, however we show up. If you're not in that top percent that make over $400,000 a year, where you'll get all these big tax breaks and corporate tax breaks, it's going to hurt you, because when one group get a tax break, the others have to come up with the money. So the middle class that's really suffering. So let me just quickly deal with this whole notion of people are saying, my life right now, inflation, I'm paying more for gas, I'm paying more for this, I'm paying more for that. Well, if you go back and you study trends of government for the last 10 years, a decade is how you really see how policy, how things play out. So before COVID, we were already at a $23 trillion deficit increase before COVID. Anytime you have a pandemic, a hurricane, or anything major, the government has to invest money to help and bail out the people. When you go into COVID and you have leadership that says it's not real, that doesn't immediately issue an executive order to take care of, to bring resources to the people, to stop the spread of this pandemic, the end results and consequences is going to be even greater because you waited too long to deal with it. It's just like the doctors diagnose you with something and you ignore it for 5 years, and now it's gone from stage 1 to stage 7. So we change administrations who have to come back and clean up COVID, deal with this deficit that we've talked about. You hear this rhetoric about NATO paying more and about all these tariffs. So the tariffs does add additional revenue to the government, but it also adds additional costs to the consumer price index. So if you're putting greater tariffs on companies that's importing gasoline and importing food, it shows up in us now with the cost being more, because when you add, let me just break it down really real. So I'm a shopper, but I'm a sales right only girl. Everything I wear, I'm going to buy it for the cheapest possible cost. So I like Termu. You know, it helps me get dresses from China for $9. Dresses that are in Macy's for $200. I pay $9. You know, something about, you know, the streets and hustling, you know how to do things. So right now, if we impose an extra $5 tax on China, that dress I'm buying for $9, I'm going to start paying $14, because China is going to pass that $5 to me as the consumer. So your food prices, your gas prices, and all these stuff are more. And then we tout it as though it's this administration that creates it. Every leader inherits the financial situation from the other leader. Now, when Obama left, we were in a pretty good kind of stabilized state, but we come to a different mindset that wants to punish other countries instead of build partnerships with tariffs, so the government can get richer and larger tax breaks can go up here, not thinking about what happens in the end result on the street. So, you know, capitalism and government don't mix. So when you get a leader that's operating government from a capitalistic perspective, in capitalism, it's about supply and demand. Right. That's why that leader was okay with people that needed insulin being charged out of their minds for it. Okay. So you get a new administration say the first thing we're going to do is we're going to restrict the cost. We're going to take Big Pharma, who's really got our people jacked up, because if you need medication, you need it. Your life sometimes depend on it. Right. So we're going to regulate and minimize the impact of what they can charge people, because of supply and demand. They got people over the barrel. We're going to start working out these problems in these situations to make things better. But it takes time for these things to come into fruition. So then we politicize it. We blame this administration, that administration, but it's a combination of administrations, both Democratic and Republican. Right. And nobody to this day has come up with a plan for mass incarceration and poverty other than Bernie Sanders. And you saw how they got him out. So we have to talk real about these issues. And those that are the rightfully cynical voters that's saying, I'm not going to vote. Ain't nothing changing in my hood. The cost of living is higher or whatever. What I can tell you, with one administration, you have a chance to get better. With another administration, you ain't seen nothing yet. It will get 3 times worse, especially if you black. And police get immunity. All police officers are not bad, but we have a lot of people coming to the police force in desperation for a job that come from places of extreme childhood trauma. A lot of us, we used to get thumped upside the head. I was raised very tomboyish, and I remember some of the guys in my neighborhood, I thump them up in the back of the head, not thinking it was going to cause any kind of trauma, any pain. Playing sports, I think about the elbows I took, rebounding to the park. Those things sometimes impact our brains, and we don't know about it. We have a lot of people coming to the police force with different ideologies and different mindsets about different groups of people, where they supposed to be there to protect and serve. When you look at states and counties that have minority police chiefs, their data is very different. I know in Broward, we got Sheriff Turner. Sheriff Turner don't play the radio. He holds everybody accountable regardless of who they are. But if you got police chiefs that are not connected to all the communities, they just see us different. So immunity means they could just openly kill black people, beat us, whatever, and they won't even be tried for it. And then for some of you young people, I have these conversations. They say, well, with Trump, my stocks are good. I have more money in the bank. And that may be true. But you're going to pay more, because with Trump, 30,000 more people didn't have health insurance. So that means that they're going to go to the emergency room. You and I pay that tax for those public hospitals in our district, just like we pay for school. So although you may see it in your bank account, it's going to go out in other ways in the form of these other living taxes that you pay, your water, your garbage, the hospital district, the school district. So what we have to do is work toward leadership that's going to help lift every segment of our community.
You mentioned tariffs. Tariffs is a tax.
Mm-hmm.
It gets smoothed over, and I love the way you described it, because if you tax something coming from China or Japan, a tariff on it, well, if it's $10 to make over there, and you put a tariff on that and makes it, I have to pay $15, they're gonna charge that. It just pass along to the consumer. Yeah. So we're paying more. The government may be getting more for them, but we're not getting it. And that's a great point you mentioned. In the last few minutes, you said earlier again, some people say, I'm not. I've heard guys say this. Man, okay, who get it off? It's going to be the same. I'm worse off than I was 4 years ago. I'm better off, whatever. And I always say it this way: you may be, but is everybody? I go back again. When you saw me hungry, you did not feed me. You saw me thirsty and you didn't give me drink. You saw me naked and you did not clothe me. You saw me in prison. You saw me sick. You didn't come and visit or see me. When do we see you that way? When you fail to do it to the least of these, my brothers. And this is about 25 years ago, and it stuck with me like glue. Gorilla glue, you want to call it. When we fail to do it to someone who, and the scripture says, I think it's 1 John, he says, if you haven't the means to help someone, and you shut up your compassion from them, the word says, how can you say the love of God dwells in you? It's not so much what make you or me better, Dr. Osgood. It's what make all of us better. And that's how we've gotten away from, you said again, helping the community. I remember my dad and mom raised, we were raised hogs, and it came time to kill a hog, man. Back in the country, it was a community thing. Folk came over and helped them do it. We don't get along now, and it's obvious that we have stepped away from the tower. And the signal is not the problem. It's the distance between you and that tower. In our last 5 minutes, just share with us closing remarks that will not only give us light, but give us a sense of direction.
Well, I think it's important if we are of age to vote that we vote. It's where we have our say-so in the political process, and everything is political. Who gets what, when, and why. The laws, whether it's the state laws, the local laws, they control our livelihood every day, what we eat, how much we pay for it, what we can and cannot do with our own property. And you're right, I agree. I don't agree 100% with no political party. As a person of color, they all need to step up and do better by us. But I can't just sit and complain about it. I have to be a part of the solution. I need to organize, advocate, and even run for office to have representation at the table. When I think about our church perspective, I just think we've gotten too grossly comfortable, and a lot of our paradigms have shifted. I talked about Daddy Weaver and Dr. Carter, that, they felt that they were led by God, and they led. A lot of times now we want to tie the pastor's hands about what they're doing or what they should not be doing. We have all these different thoughts that we've adopted from the ideology, of the world, where, we want to, have this shared decision making in isolation. Yeah. But we don't want to have the shared responsibility of fulfilling the Bible. When I hear you talk about the poor, the naked, and I think about the Church of Macedonia that gave beyond what they had to give. And God basically says the poor is going to be with you always. Why? Because the church ain't going to do what they need to do to take care of the poor. So I can argue that should we as a church be doing a better job to take care of poor people, that they don't have to depend on the government. Well, the reality is I work at the church, and I know that we all grow to that point where we have a relationship with God, where we're committed and faithfully giving those tithes. Right. You know, it ain't everybody in the church that's operating like that. We have to grow to that point that we're doing that in our maturity in our relationship with God. So I think that we're at a point now where we really need to examine ourselves individually and come to the understanding that it's the sum total of us all. I'll close with this drastic analogy. I'm from Florida. Last weekend, a man was found in some bushes with all kind of AR-14 in a setup where he had been staked out for 12 hours to shoot Donald Trump. Some say Trump is a reality show host. It was all made up, just like the other shot. He didn't really get shot. And because we're in this time of this spirit of delusion and lies, has everything suspect. Some people, church people say, I wish the man would have shot Donald Trump. I wish the man would have done this and that. It was people that was glad that Dr. King was shot. Yeah. We don't like to be talking about it, black and white people. So it really made me evaluate myself as a Christian. You know, Donald Trump and I are polar opposites in policy. But I have to believe the God that radically transformed my life can turn Donald Trump's heart from himself to others. I have to believe that, because if I don't believe that, then I'm putting limits on the God that I serve. It's the same quandary that I have when I'm asked to support the death penalty, and I can't do it because I believe the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So this person is horrible. They're a pedophile. They did it. I agree, but I'm not God. You know, so we struggle with these things. That's the point that I'm making. Yep. It's a struggle and a challenge. But I will tell you, Bishop, the more I'm in the Word, the more I seek to grow in my personal relationship with God, the more wisdom I have. And I kind of basically judge stuff. It's not easy being elected. People see you on TV. They see all the hoopla that go with it, but they don't see the nights you stay up reading. They don't see the battle, especially you as a Christian. It's totally different. The battle, the conflict with the flesh and spirit. So at the end of the day, I have to be able to sleep at night. So that's why I have to pray for Donald Trump. I have to pray for Ron DeSantis. I have to pray for Kamala Harris. You know, it is Kamala. You got to make sure we get that right. Kamala Harris. Yeah. I have to pray because as a Christian, I know that the Bible gives me a framework, that God gives me an opportunity to make my supplications, to come boldly to his throne with my supplications, expecting grace, mercy, and help in the time of need. And sometimes that prayer is a prayer in humility. Lord, I don't know how to forgive. Yeah. Lord, I don't know what to do. Lord, I'm feeling some kind of way, but I don't want to be wrong in my relationship with you. So I'm struggling right now. We can't just continue to go on with this self-righteous genre where 1 minute we're saying we love God, and then the next minute we're celebrating that somebody got shot at, no matter who they are.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've been blessed so much by our guest, Dr. Rosalind Osgood, who shared and poured out her heart and share with you some steps to recovery, because we all, whether we admit it or not, have some struggle we're going through. But God is faithful, and he's no respecter of person. What he's done for Dr. Osgood, he can do for you. Thank you so much tonight for being with us. Be back next week another time on How We Got Here. This is Effell. So thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week another time. God bless. See you next week.